Farm Progress Broadcast presents This Week in Agribusiness, serving America's most essential industry. Brought to you by Case IH, solutions for every challenge, equipment for every farm. Case IH, built by farmers.
Hello everyone and welcome to This Week in Agribusiness. As spring moves along, planting progress is moving forward as well, which is a reminder, folks, there is a lot of big equipment out there on the roads this time of year. Be patient. If you get behind a big piece of equipment, give them a little bit of grace. That's an important person to somebody in their family. And we've got further proof of farmers getting underway. Kurt Ahrens, editor of Nebraska Farmer, sent us this image of Jason Libby, the farm manager at Husker Harvest Days, getting their corn in the ground. And what a clean field he's planting into. That's the topic of our next piece, Agronomy for Your Acres, with our friends from Nutrien Ag Solutions. Joining us now is Kelsey McGee. She's a crop consultant down in Missouri. And Kelsey, let's talk about the importance of planting into a clean field. Why is that something you're so adamant about?
Yeah, so right now, I think we all know that conditions are pretty dry across the Corn Belt. Here specifically in Northeast Missouri, we're in a drought. So I think about, the 3-3-1 rule. In 3 days, 3-inch weeds can take an inch of moisture from the soil. So obviously we want to preserve as much moisture as we can so we can maximize, our seed germination, get it even stand. Because we only do have one time, to plant that crop, and you want to do it right.
Absolutely. Kelsey, when we're thinking of those pre-emergence chemical applications, what are some products you'd recommend for this time of year?
Yeah, so obviously we want to look at a multiple mode of action type product. Specifically, Nutrien has a product called Matador S, which is 3 modes of action. It really helps limit our ability, to help control these water hemp problems that we're having, because we are getting a lot of resistance against a lot of these chemistry groups, and we're becoming very limited with these amount of tools that we have in our bucket, and with a residual, it's so important because all of these tools in our bucket are going to one day limit us to where we could go back to glyphosate resistance, and we may not be able to control any of these problems weed.
Kelsey, adjuvants. Let's talk about those. What can they or how can they change the efficacy of what you're applying?
Yeah, so we all know that not every day is a perfect day to spray. The wind's not always blowing 5 miles an hour, and the sun isn't always shining, so the leaf cuticles can change in certain weather conditions, so these adjuvants do help, improve the performance, and they help modify, your spray pattern, your droplet size, and also helps to move these pesticides through the plants. Not all adjuvants are created equal. And so with that, Loveland has created a system called LessiTech through their adjuvant system. And it actually helps, the adjuvant to get in the plant, on the plant, and in the plant.
Kelsey, before we let you go, soil temperatures, did they impact the efficiency?
Yeah, so there could be times, yes. So early in the season when it's cool, obviously those residuals will last a lot longer. But as time goes on and these soil temperatures do get warmer, there's degradation that happens in the soil. So, going back to the adjuvant piece, we do have a product within our Loveland products lineup called Infuse that I really recommend, putting, with these residuals to extend their life expectancy.
Lots to look at this time of year for growers to keep those fields clean. That's Kelsey McGee, crop consultant with Nutrien Ag Solutions. And if you want to learn more, visit nutrienagsolutions.com. Today's larger, heavier equipment can lead to more soil compaction issues. Firestone Ag IFVF tires with AD2 technology maximize load capacity while minimizing soil compaction. Visit firestoneag.com to learn more. And now it's time to look at these markets. Joining us this week is Dave Weber, the beef and swine analyst with Terrain. Dave, let's talk about these cattle markets first. We've seen a bit of a pullback here over the past couple of weeks. What's changed in the sector?
Well, we've kind of gone through some Easter holiday doldrums, we could call it, as we seasonally go through the Easter holiday. This year was better than average for beef ads, but at the same time, Packers got some inventory around them. Box counts went up. We've kind of had to clear that out of the system. That's put some pressure on us from the box beef cutout, it dipping under $3 here for a little bit. That's kind of put a little pressure on the fed cattle market, but the fed cattle market's got its own challenges. As we came out of the January snowstorms, got rid of the weight problem we started the year with, and then all of a sudden it's back. As we look at the big inventories of carryout corn in the Midwest, we continue to put those days on cattle and have got weights back to about 25 pounds a head bigger than a year ago. And that's a little bit of leverage gain for the packer, loss for the feed yard. We don't have as much bargaining position as we had. Plus, we've got pretty good size on feed numbers. We're up about 2% by our estimates. I think it's the average estimate for the report that's coming out on Friday for the analyst pool. From a placement standpoint, March was a bit of a challenge. We had 2 fewer days. That takes about 12% of the opportunity to do business out of the month. So we've got to factor that into our thinking as we look at placements and marketings. I've got our placement number down about 91.5% of a year ago. I think the average analyst guess is about 92.5. So I'm a little bit smaller there. Thinking about as we look at the prices we're seeing on some cattle, some yards opting really not to place cattle with more record break evens, essentially. From a marketing standpoint, it was kind of a slow month because of the days. So we didn't get as many cattle sold. I've got marketings for the month about 87%. I think I'm right on the estimate for the analyst group. We've got most all the slaughter data to go against that. So it's pretty tight range of estimates there. But as we look at, going forward here, I think we're in kind of reset mode here as we go into spring grilling season. Packers getting inventories cleaned up, kind of getting reset on their buy. And now we've got a pretty good, nice run going into Memorial Day holiday.
Dave, you mentioned expect to see those placements continue to come down, but then once those cattle are in the feedlot, my little back of the envelope math with corn priced in here still shows a lot of margin in cost of gain. Are we going to see these cattle weights continue to accelerate as we get into summer?
Well, I think I think we'll keep the gap year over year, but we'll start to see a downtrend. And that's partly the transition from yearling cattle to calf-fed cattle. So we'll see that dip as we go into the late June timeframes, typically where we bottom out. We're going to start to see that come, but we got a lot of work to do to get just to the 5-year average in terms of decline and get rid of that extra 25 pounds. And to your point, with cost of gains where they're at, the high break evens we've got, there's a lot of incentive for feed yards to keep those cattle around. They don't like the price of replacement cattle. The break evens projected on those say you're better off just keeping it and feeding the one you've got. And then when we look, especially in the Midwest, with a lot of the corn that's still sitting there, it looks like farmers have made the option to say, hey, we're going to walk this corn out of these facilities and not worry about marketing all of last year's corn as we transition into thinking about what we're going to do for plantings and those things for this year.
There's a lot to come, a lot of decisions left ahead of us. Dave, when we come back, I want to talk to you about the demand side of the beef market and also take a look at what's happening in pork. So folks, stay with us. We'll be back with more after this. Today's larger, heavier equipment can lead to more soil compaction issues. Firestone Ag IFVF tires with AD2 technology maximize load capacity while minimizing soil compaction. Visit firestoneag.com to learn more. We're talking about the protein markets this week with Dave Weber. He's the beef and swine analyst with Terrain. And Dave, we've talked about these elevated prices being driven on the beef side at least by a reduction in supply, but they're also have been supported by consumer demand. What have you seen lately? How are consumers reacting to these price levels at the meat case today?
Well, consumers have been very loyal, faithful purchasers of beef really since last summer when we went back to looking at real per capita spending since July. Beef was up about 4% for the back half of 2023. So as we talk about, what's going on in interest rates and inflation, beef finally caught up on the inflationary side. So spending grew as a result of that. But as we look at the transition to the new year, concerns about how many rate cuts we're going to get from the Fed, those are probably looking like they're all in the back end of the year if we get some. Looking at jobs reports, those kind of thing, wage rates, consumers' pocketbook's still pretty healthy. Yeah. And as a result, we've seen beef spending up about 4% since the beginning of the year. And that's a transition that we haven't seen in a long time. Beef taking money out of the poultry business from a spending standpoint. On the poultry side, especially on the chicken production side, we've seen spending down about 3.5–4% the back half of the year. So it's almost a $1 for dollar trade out into beef. I think consumers looking for maybe replacing some of those restaurant eating experiences. Instead of going out to a steakhouse as a family, you can take one of those meal tickets and buy a steak at the grocery store or your club store. And we've taught folks how to do it at home. And it looks like that spending is going to continue. And you look at what's going on in other retail data, it looks like consumers are really trying to do the trade-off in other parts of the store and letting meat kind of be a winner there, trying to seek that real high quality kind of protein experience.
All right. Well, that is good news to see beef taking away some market share from the poultry side. Good for cattle producers anyway. Dave, what's happening on the pork demand front? I know U.S. consumption was down a little bit in 2023. Is that changing in this new year?
No, not yet. And as we look at that kind of the back half of the year perspective, pork spending down about 3.5%. That was partly lack of exports, a lot of extra supply in the U.S. market. So prices were on the low side, and we're starting to see that finally transition. We had a couple of rough months as we started this year, January, February, kind of on that same trend, down 3.5% on real per capita spending. But since then, we've seen prices at the wholesale market move back up with cutout, making gains, especially on butts and bellies and hams. The rib markets finally caught some action with the spring grilling season coming. And then we're starting to see loin prices move higher as well. So that's starting to help. I expect as we go into the summer, that transition is going to help support cutout values, hog prices as well.
Dave, on the supply side, last fall, I heard a lot of talk about the need to increase sow slaughter, reduce the supply of pork. Did the market end up following through on that?
Yeah, we have. We've been slaughtering quite a few sows. In the last Hogs and Pigs report, looks like females kept for breeding down about 2.1% in the report. So that's good news for producers that were trying to liquidate. We had kind of a backlog of sows really from March on last year, really just essentially filling sow slaughter capacity for the year. We've gotten through a lot of that. We've gotten the breeding herd more efficient, got rid of some of the tail end producers. The reproductive performance, those kind of things that we were having trouble with. We've gotten those sows through the system. But then when you look at what's going on from a productivity side, we've raised average productivity about 5% if we measure it by pigs per litter. So we've got a net about 3% growth still in terms of numbers of hogs coming through the system.
That's Dave Weber, beef and swine analyst with Terrain.
Greg Solier now brings us his farm weather forecast for the week ahead.
Well, let's take a look at that weather forecast. Greg Solier is here. And Greg, it was quiet last week in the Pacific Northwest. Is that going to change?
No, really the same old as in a winding down of El Nino. We're moving out of the winter precipitation season as well. So each of these features are getting weaker and weaker, kind of a double-edged sword. At the same time, you've got opportunities for outdoor work heightening on up and ramping on up, and field work too. But we have dryness and drought and the snow drought that played out this wintertime season. So a little more moisture, and the only way you're going to do it is get some late season or early spring storminess to get going up near the Canadian border and points northward, but we just don't see it. A couple of weak systems here, one west of Yellowstone, one south and east of the Black Hills. Had a little snow there last week. Most of northern California, Pacific Northwest is quiet. Return to more seasonal temperatures, so we move out of the frost and freeze cycle here. This is a developing warm front as temperatures up aloft, warm. We sink the air, and some of that mild air working to the plains. There may be a couple of scattered showers and thunderstorms, but we're not real optimistic in getting significant drought improvement through the not only northern plains and upper Midwest, the Dakotas, but the southern Canadian prairie as well. That may breed, again, the same story we had last year with the smoke and fires and debris and atmospheric dust. In any event, one of these weak El Nino systems across the desert southwest, a couple of spots of rain and snow across the mountain locales, mostly into the Plain States areas. It's a Jekyll and Hyde setup of drought versus no drought, or at least improvement. A couple of scattered showers and thunderstorms, and boy, they rampaged out of Nebraska east across the Corn Belt last last week. Later on this week, here's that warm front moving on by. We may trigger a stray shower thunderstorm, but otherwise warming temperatures and soils across the plain states. If we haven't done that already, maybe some heat back into the play over the desert Southwest, low to mid 90s, and a pretty quiet weather set up across the valleys of California. Mike, the runoff potential looks fantastic off the Sierra for later this season.
Greg, you mentioned that severe weather outbreak across the northern Corn Belt. Is that a risk in play this week?
I don't think so. Not the degree and widespread nature. It went from Nebraska to Ohio and to Pennsylvania last week, but this week and through the middle part of the week, pretty much quiet weather. This system will move on through quickly with a couple of scattered showers and thunderstorms anticipated. Slightly cooler air across areas up near the Canadian border, but otherwise we're certainly down and reduced from this widespread moisture-making pattern of late. The pattern shift is finally getting underway. We'll talk about that a little bit later on. High pressure centered north of the Sioux. Seasonal temperatures across the eastern Corn Belt. Back west of the Missouri, a couple of scattered showers, maybe a thunderstorm, but otherwise there should be opportunities for fieldwork. First west, to a lesser degree off to the east, Michigan, Indiana, and Ohio. What is it, 50 to 70% surplus topsoil moisture there. Still a little bit wet and spongy. A couple of showers and thunderstorms into parts of the central and southern winter wheat belt. Cooler air and some windswept air back west of the Rio Grande. We need the dry time in the Delta region, eastern Texas, and down through Bayou country coming off the recent rains there, with streams and rivers still at or better than bankful. And again, back into high pressure here. No big weather issues over the deep south and southeastern states. Warmer, drier air across the central and southern plains. A couple of showers and thunderstorms anticipated down across areas of the Rio Grande. Some heat building as you'd expect in the desert Southwest.
Any chance for dry down in the eastern half of the U.S.?
I think with time, the general net effect, we're moving into a more typical, more normalized, more progressive weather pattern. So yeah, we do have some moisture early in the week here over the eastern Corn Belt, 50 to 70% too wet in Michigan, Indiana, and Ohio. I think we'll make more progress to start things off in the western sections. Otherwise, high pressure over the northeastern parts of the country. As we move on through the late portion of the week, here's a warm front. Yeah, temperatures will do just that. Seasonal conditions across the Ohio Valley. High pressure and dry time here. A little rain snow mix across sections of down eastern Maine. So yeah, maybe some opportunity for some spring field work across the Midwest here as the week wears on. Some showers and thunderstorms across areas of Florida and through the Delta and southeastern parts of the country. High pressure in control. Little change expected there as the week wears on. We'll have that 4-week forecast coming up in the second half hour.
Closed captioning for This Week in Agribusiness is brought to you by Pentair Hypro, a global leader in innovative spray technology for farmers for over 75 years.
Apple growers, like so many of us in the ag industry, have seen a volatile past few years marked by changing markets, higher prices on the farm, and labor issues. Joining me now to talk about the industry as we move into 2024 is Jim Baer, President and CEO of the U.S. Apple Association. Jim, thanks so much for joining us this week.
Good to see you, Mike. Thanks for having me.
Let's get an update on the industry today. Jim, how was harvest last fall for America's apple growers?
Harvest had been down for a couple of years, but we came bouncing back in 2023. It was a much larger crop than anybody was expected, and we had weather problems that made people suspicious. But nonetheless, Mother Nature powered through, as she often does. We had a big crop, and now we're scrambling to try to sell that big crop, and that's a challenge. Farmers hear every day, and I'm sure they're as frustrated as we are about reading and seeing on TV everybody talking about food price inflation. Of course, growers never see that, and we're not either. Even though the cost of production is up significantly, the actual commodity prices for us are no different than it is for many of your other readers and listeners around the country. Prices are down.
Prices are down. Jim, as you think in comparison to last year, percentage-wise, on average, how far down are we? Is this a substantial hit to apple growers' income?
Prices are down about 11%, but the cost of producing apples is up about 30%. And of course, the costs of those production inputs, those are already booked a year ago, going into the season, just no different than row crop growers. You've already paid for the expenses, and then you hope to have a crop that you can sell. And so even though they had paid those higher price for inputs in terms of labor, that's always number one in our case, because all apples still have to be hand picked. and then fertilizer, fuel, and so forth. So even though the costs are up, the price we're receiving are down.
All right, Jim, let's talk about markets. How can we sell those apples? Of course, Americans consume a lot internally, but I understand we've also historically been major exporters of apples. Can you fill us in on how that scene has changed over the past few years?
You bet. We normally, in a so-called normal year, would export about a third of the crop, and that'd be worth about $1 billion. We had export markets that were expanding nicely, particularly India in 2018 had become our #2 export market. And I have always talked, and you and I have had this conversation, that it's a miracle of modern agriculture that we can ship a perishable commodity 9,000 miles to the port of Mumbai, India. And when it gets there, not only is it still good to eat, but the people can afford it. And I just see that that's a miracle. Well, and the market there in India had been growing nicely. It had become our #2 export market. And then when the former administration imposed the steel and aluminum tariffs, they retaliated, and our exports to India basically went to zero. And unfortunately, as growers of all commodities know all too well, we're usually the collateral damage. And when those tariffs to retaliate were imposed, our exports went to zero, and then that vacuum, of course, is always filled by other suppliers. And in our case, with apples to India, it was supplied by countries that don't like us very much, like like Iran and Turkey. And so that was just salt in the wounds to lose what was our #2 market and then have it taken over by countries that don't particularly like us. So we were really happy last summer when the current administration negotiated the removal of those additional tariffs on U.S. apples to India. We're back in the market. We're making sales. We're probably going to end this year at about 1/10 of what we shipped in 2018. But nonetheless, at least we're back in the game. We're shipping, and we'll work to build that market back. But it's painful to spend decades building these export markets for U.S. ag products and then to lose them due to political considerations. But at least we're back in the game there.
That's good news. Hopefully apple growers can find more buyers overseas. Jim, while we've got you, the other big challenge facing orchard producers, of course, continues to be labor. It is an election year. What are the expectations of any relief coming from Congress in this year?
The need is great. The expectation for any reform is unfortunately a pretty dismal picture. The fact that we and other labor-intensive segments of U.S. agriculture got the Farm Workforce Modernization Act passed twice through the House was another miracle. Unfortunately, the Senate didn't take it up, and now both the House and the Senate are so evenly divided, and there's so much rancor and frankly hatred and unwillingness to work together as two political parties, means that not much is going to get done in this election year, and probably not anything. And so even though the need is great, probably not much is going to get done. And that's always been true for animal agriculture. They cannot use the only legal means of using foreign-born labor, the H-2A visa, which is used for specialty commodities like apples. Yeah. And it's not a cheap thing, and by law, if you use that visa program, you have to hire any American that walks onto your property, and nobody does. And those that occasionally do usually quit after the first day because it's hard work.
It is. Jim, we're going to have to keep talking about this in future episodes. This is a huge issue, folks, impacting apple growers and other agriculturalists. Jim Baer of the U.S. Apple Association, thanks for joining us this week.
You bet. Thanks for having me.
Farm Progress Broadcast presents This Week in Agribusiness, serving America's most essential industry. Brought to you by Case IH, solutions for every challenge, equipment for every farm. Case IH, built by farmers.
Welcome back to This Week in Agribusiness. In the face of pressing environmental challenges and the search for a sustainable fuel that emits less pollutants than conventional fossil fuels, biodiesel has emerged as a solution for heavy-duty fleets. Clean Fuels Alliance America's technical director, Scott Fenwick, is joining us today, and we're going to talk about interest growing across the country in the use of B100. Scott, thanks for taking the time to talk with us.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Let's talk about B100. Scott, first and foremost, what is it as a product?
So B100 would be known as biodiesel, pure biodiesel, prior to any blends. We often refer to blends of biodiesel in the marketplace like B20 to be a 20% blend of biodiesel, which would mean 80% of that would be a petroleum ultra low sulfur diesel fuel.
Okay, and so now we've got fleets interested in using B100 or 100% biodiesel. Scott, what's driving that?
Certainly, I think that sustainability, ESG goals towards carbon reduction really are what are driving that. Now, whether that comes directly from the organization, the corporation, their shareholders, really the industry in general, people are deciding they want less and less carbon emitted into the atmosphere, and we're probably the lowest cost option for people to accomplish their goals.
Given that that's the scenario right now in the economy, Scott, are we seeing interest in B100 across all industries?
We really are, and that's one of the goals of Clean Fuels Alliance America, the trade association, is to help ensure that increasing blends and volumes of biodiesel and renewable diesel can be used in any diesel fueled application, whether or not that's on-road and heavy duty, off-road, ag, construction equipment, or even railroads and locomotives, marine application, home heating oils, power generation. Our goal is to educate people on the benefits of these renewable fuels and help them to integrate that into their own businesses.
Scott, if we're moving to a higher blend of biodiesel, does this mean that quality continues to improve in the product? Can you tell us a little bit about what type of testing happens to this fuel before it gets out to the public?
Absolutely. One of the first options that we had was to introduce biodiesel to the marketplace. We needed OEM acceptance. And to do that, we established an ASTM international specification for biodiesel back in roughly the year 2000. And so our quality and the oversight for biodiesel is probably more stringent than it is for diesel fuel. There are more parameters that get tested. Our quality is tighter and tighter. And we do annual surveys of the biodiesel out there in the marketplace to help ensure that the quality is up to the specifications and up to the expectations of consumers and the performance in today's engines.
Scott Fenwick, Technical Director at the Clean Fuels Alliance America, thank you so much for talking with us this week.
Thank you.
To learn more about the programs available at the Clean Fuels Alliance America, visit their website at cleanfuels.org.
Greg Sodier is back now with his extended farm weather forecast for the nation.
Greg, earlier in the program you mentioned we could see some rainfall next week. Who's going to get what?
Well, we're probably going to see much lesser coverage, lighter amounts. So let's not get all worked up if we see maybe some potential here approaching an inch in some areas of the western Corn Belt, eastern plains. And actually, if it came down here, which we anticipate, guess what? Kind of the corridor of the worst dryness and drought ongoing. It'll just be isolated amounts up to here. Most everyone else into the quarter to half-inch category. That's normal for mid to late April each week. So there you go. Maybe an inch or two early in the week down across Florida, not much into the northeast and New England, scattered across Big Sky country, scattered to maybe fair or good Pacific Northwest coastal sections, otherwise high and dry for the time of year, and it is, you would expect it, valleys of California and into the desert Southwest as well.
Greg, what's the temperature outlook here as we get to the final week in April?
I think we're going to like it here. These ups and down swings will continue on. Warmth into the soils. Look at this. Boy, we've had some spikes up into the low to mid 80s last week. As far north as just about Chicago and the I-80 corridor. Probably going to do it again here. Can't rule out a couple of 90-degree readings into the southwestern sections of the Corn Belt. Warmth into the Ohio Valley. Normal across Dixie. Warm in the desert Southwest and in the Pacific Northwest about normal. So you get this arcing, this ridging of high pressure aloft, sinking air, two separate jet streams. This is the main polar branch moving to the north, and so the cold air hence goes to the north. Look at the dry time for the upper Midwest. Maybe not great news for the Dakota Dakotas, Canadian Prairie, but it's okay for Michigan, Indiana, and Ohio. A separate southern branch keeps some wet weather down through Dixie into the southeastern part of the country across sections of the west too. So it's a pretty favorable here, mid to late April weather pattern as we see it now.
Do those above average temperatures stick around for the week of May 6th?
They generally do here. Here it is. This is almost record-setting territory. Wouldn't be surprised. We're looking at some maybe 90-degree air into parts of the central Corn Belt locales, and hopefully that doesn't get those grounds to dry out so quickly they get that rock-hard crust to them. But again, field work, planting operations, all ahead forward here. Warmth running from about the divide into the northeast of New England, down through Florida. Here's some of that cool air, and not a lot of cold air, mind you, valleys of California into the Pacific Northwest, and we'll get a little moisture gain here. Parts of Oklahoma, Texas, down across the Gulf Coast. Again, a very weakening El Nino setup down here. This will be abating here in the weeks and next couple of months to come. Look at high pressure below sinking air and where we need it in the northern and eastern Corn Belt locales, especially eastern sections, more dry time and fieldwork progress. Maybe some worsening of the drought through sections of the upper Midwest.
How do temperatures look as we get into the middle part of May, Greg?
Beginning to see maybe a little modest cool down on the move, a progressive as in things are moving along. So the warmth begins to ease up, move into the southeastern part of the country. Temperatures more normalized across the northern and western Corn Belt. A little prod of some cooler air across sections of the northern and central divide Pacific Northwest. And so we get, again, some moisture gain Pacific Northwest into parts of the Great Plains, into sections of the northern and central Corn Belt locales with showers and thunderstorms and brief fieldwork delays.
Our Farm Progress Roundup is brought to you by Brandt Industries. Lead the field with Brandt's lineup of highly effective and efficient high-speed discs and land rollers. Visit Brandt.ca for more. Here at Farm Progress, we cover a lot of issues that matter to the agricultural economy. Andy Castillo serves as the Farm Progress Farm Technology and Equipment Editor, and sometimes in that role, he's watching court proceedings. Andy, I understand there was some recent end of litigation in a court case. Can you fill us in on the details?
Thank you, Mike. So this is related to Deere, Kinsey, and Ag Leader. And this litigation goes back to 2020 when John Deere sued the two other smaller brands, basically saying that they infringed on its patents related to planting technology, specifically the technology that correctly spaces the seed in the trench as the vehicle's moving. So whether it goes faster, whether it goes slower, the seed is consistently placed in the same spot every time. This went on for a number of years, and then last October, an Iowa jury ruled in favor of Deere, awarding $16 million in damages, and basically said that yes, the other two companies did infringe on the patents. Fast forward to recently, and now these three brands have ended all litigation, and they're playing nicely together.
Andy, now that seems kind of interesting. We see all sorts of these kind of lawsuits in the industry, but playing together, is that a change?
This is indeed a change, and it's related to an industry trend that I've personally noticed. It's basically machinery brands listening to farmers. And what farmers are saying is that I have all of these different colored pieces of equipment, and I need them all to work together. And in the past, competition has driven manufacturers and individual brands to say, no, I'm only going to let this piece of equipment work with the brands that I produce. And that's really changing. And the big winner here, in my opinion, is the farmer.
So Andy, specifically in this case, how is the farmer going to be impacted with this new decision?
Well, Kinsey's and Ag Leader's technologies related to planting, they can use them once again. So John Deere is going to be licensing out its patents to the two brands, so that if you are a farmer and you've been using these particular technologies, you can now access them again. So that's big news. But more broadly, this is a signal that there's going to be future collaboration between the three of these brands.
All right, things are maybe changing in the world of ag equipment. Folks, you can read Andy's piece and all of his writing at the Farm Progress website at www.farmprogress.com. Andy, thank you so much for taking the time to fill us in on these issues and for giving us the update.
Thank you, Mike.
And folks, stay with us. We'll have more This Week in Agribusiness when we come back.
Next on This Week in Agribusiness, it's Max's Tractor Shed, where we spotlight another great American farm tractor. I've been a big fan of the FFA Tractor Restoration Contest for quite some time. The students learned so much from that experience. I'll give you an example of how the students worked on this tractor in Max's Tractor Shed. Brought to you by Mystic Lubricants. Mystic Lubricants are made to make it last. Well, at the town of Forreston, Illinois, a team of 7 students worked on this old Case tractor, this Case VAC. And their teacher told me the students were very engaged in the process. At that school, their ag advisor, Kelly Park, said the boys were, as she put it, very self-motivated on this project. Quite often, fundraising is a challenge for the restoration effort, so there at Forreston, Illinois, they're holding a raffle. I mean, they had to spend some money for things like the paint, the decals, 4 brand new tires, the battery, the switches. Well, someone will get a nicely restored old Case tractor because they're having a raffle on this. The students captured knowledge and experience that they have gained, to be sure. We tip our hat to the FFA Tractor Restoration Efforts. That national contest draws a lot of attention every year. I helped judge it many years ago. Well, let's see what's moving across the block at Big Iron Auctions this week. Mark Stock joins us.
Well, hello, Max. The auction industry has changed dramatically the last few years. Today, people can bid and buy machinery from their smartphones. It's a very simple and easy to use process. So if you are in the field, folks, please be safe, and you can watch the Fegler Farms Retirement Sale with equipment by Arapahoe, Wyoming. 348 items on this retirement auction, featuring a New Holland T5070 tractor, New Holland 2550 speed rower, lots of hay equipment. And Max, land is still a hot commodity. On Tuesday, April the 23rd, we'll be selling an acreage in Porter County, Indiana. We'll be selling 4 different tracts in McPherson County, Kansas. 1,900 items will sell on April the 24th on Big Iron, featuring a John Deere 9230 4-wheel drive tractor and a nice selection of construction equipment. And don't forget to check out our great selection of dump trucks. And Thursday, April the 25th, 6,242 acres of Brown County, Nebraska ranch land will sell in 3 tracts. Beautiful property, folks, including a 300-acre private lake. Dial up BigIron.com for all the auction action next week.
Our FFA Chapter Tribute is brought to you by Pioneer, developing new generations of seed innovations for new generations of farmers. Pioneer, what's next happens here. And this week, we're talking with Harrison Fallborn. He's a member of the Colorado State FFA Executive Committee. Harrison, I understand you grew up in agriculture. Can you tell us about your background?
Yeah, so I grew up in Longmont, Colorado. My family raises Columbia sheep and Hereford cattle, as well as I've had a lot of experience with production Angus. And then on top of that, it was just always something I was around, going from brandings in the spring. So, yeah.
Agriculture was a part of your life. Then what made you want to be a part of FFA?
My mom always told me about my uncles doing FFA back in South Carolina. And so from there, I decided that because I wanted to be a rancher, that would be a wonderful thing for me, and leadership opportunity and extracurriculars too.
So what were some of the highlights of your time as a member of FFA?
Just honestly meeting people, all the things that I got to do. We have something called Fall Leadership Conference where we have 2 guys come in, both Rhett and Kelly, and they facilitate for us. And you're only supposed to go 1 year, but I've been 5 years, including my state office year. And so I've enjoyed it, and it's a wonderful growth opportunity.
It's fantastic to find those opportunities in FFA. Harrison, during your year on the executive committee, what have been the highlights here so far?
I really love National Western. We get to live at the National Western, and that's been unique because I've shown there for about 10, 14 years, somewhere in there. My parents say that I've been showing well since 4, but I've gotten to live there, work there, as well as now show there for my last year, and that's been a really cool opportunity.
That is very cool. And long term, you plan to stay in the ag industry?
Circle. I do, yeah. I plan on going to CSU for ranch management and ag education.
All right, Harrison. Well, we wish you the absolute best. Good luck with the continued work on the Colorado Executive Committee, and we look forward to watching you going further.
Well, thank you.
Colby Ag Tech is brought to you by Copperhead Ag Products. Visit copperheadag.com for more information. In 2024, it seems like we can't really live without our screens. Well, tech expert Chad Colby has some updates coming to one of those most important pieces of technology on the farm, the iPad.
One of the common questions I've been getting asked the last several months is, Chad, when's the next iPad coming out? And the reason why is it's late in that model cycle. We didn't get a new iPad in 2023. The last one was in the fall of 22. And iPads are really the common tool in agriculture. You get into most growers' pickup trucks or in their cabs of their tractors or sprayers or combine. Not uncommon to see a tablet up in the corner. This footage right here is from this spring, and yep, there's an iPad in the corner. Well, I've got some good news. Two things. Number one, don't buy one right now because the new one is right around the corner. It looks like in the next few weeks. You can see that big iPad there on the corner post. It's going to come in two models, an 11-inch iPad Pro and a 13-inch. It's going to have a new chassis and a brand new screen, and the screen is a really big deal. It looks like Apple's got a couple vendors making the screen right now. It's the same screen that we have in our phones, so expect them to use less power, be much better in direct sunlight, and probably the big news is it's got the next generation, I guess you would say, of processor in it, which is a huge jump. If you've got a tablet older than a 2021, I highly recommend you upgrade to this because you're already kind of a couple steps behind. Even the model I have is a 2021 model tablet. It came out in April. Ready for this? 3 years ago, which is crazy in that cycle, but it still works great. Now, the new one will be a big jump from that. I'll keep you posted. It looks like it's just a couple weeks away, and there's a lot of conversations about other things that this thing's going to do. Certainly a new camera. It's going to have a new keyboard. There'll be an advanced pencil for it, and probably a lot of other things that we just don't know quite yet. So stay tuned. For This Week in Agribusiness, I'm Chad Colby.
Thanks, Chad. We'll be watching to see what this new iPad can do once you're able to give it a full review. Folks, stick around. We'll have more This Week in Agribusiness coming up next. Yes, folks, it is an election year, November 2024. Everybody will be going to the polls, but ahead of then, a lot of things must get done in Congress. One of them, or at least that they'd like to get done, is the Farm Bill. Our own Patrick Haggerty had the chance to visit D.C. and get some details on what's happening with that major piece of legislation.
We're in the United States Congress today with Glenn Thompson, or as he asks everybody to call him, GT. Congressman Thompson is the chairman of the House Agriculture Committee, and welcome to This Week in Agribusiness.
Pat, thank you so much. An honor to be with you.
America's farmers and ranchers, you're the chairman of the committee. Yeah. Would love an update on the Farm Bill.
Yeah, I mean, our farmers deserve I think, a highly effective, even transformational Farm Bill, and a bipartisan one, because that's where you're going to get your best input, and that's what we're going to deliver. Looking forward to marking up this Farm Bill without a doubt before Memorial Day, which is not that far away.
No, obviously. Memorial Day, yeah.
Yeah, and it'll be before Memorial Day, so where in May, we'll see where that falls. But things are falling into place nicely in terms of our preparation to do that.
Is there anything in there? Let's talk about what farmers are going to like, perhaps risk management tools.
Sure.
Is there going to be any disappointments in there?
I hope not, because we've based on this development of this Farm Bill by using our ears, not our mouth,
right.
And listening twice as much as what we speak. Probably pushing over 85 listening sessions, 40 states, 1 territory. Really bringing the voices of American agriculture to the table. So, I think, we've listened to them and they're very, very clear. The safety net is extremely important. I think we'll have, at the end of the day, a robust Title I, which was, an expensive ask, but I think we've figured out a way to do that. Certainly making, my goal is to make crop insurance more affordable. So we increase subscriptions. That's good for it. It's a public-private partnership. And that's not just for new, young, and beginning farmers, but those farmers that have been out there toiling away in the soil for 30 years, they deserve to have it more affordable as well. Investments in American agriculture, which is science, technology, and innovation. So investing in science, investing in our land-grant universities, and then just a lot. I mean, the amount of new policies that have been brought to the table in a bipartisan way, and I see many of them are very effective. We're looking forward to incorporating those. Now, we need to find a way to pay for them, and I think we're having some success with that. There's no new dollars outside the jurisdiction of agriculture. No. So this is like reprioritizing within our jurisdiction. But at the end of the day, I think we're going to be successful.
The House is further along than the Senate. Once you're there, the Senate's there, you see any problems with reconciliation? No,
we'll work it out. We always have in the past. We'll trade, I'm hoping it'll be helpful to the Senate. We send them a highly effective bipartisan farm bill.
Chairman Thompson, thanks so much for being with us today.
Pleasure.
I'm Patrick Haggerty, This Week in Agribusiness.
Thank you, Patrick, for that update. 85 listening sessions so far. There's certainly been a lot of input in this next farm bill. The question is, when are we going to see some output from Congress? Well, keep your eyes on the calendar there. Memorial Day will be here before we know it. Folks, thanks so much for tuning in this week. We'll be back next time right here with more This Week in Agribusiness.
This Week in Agribusiness has been brought to you by Case IH. Solutions for every challenge. Equipment for every farm. Case IH, built by farmers. This Week in Agribusiness is produced by 22 Creative Group and has been a presentation of Farm Progress Broadcast. We invite you to visit us online at agbizweek.com.